And staying with that story of the NASA launch of the manifesto, I'd like to hand over now to Michelle Ngele, who's going to be talking to ODM-nominated Senator Dr. Agnes Zani, and it's basically highlighting on the launch of the manifesto. Over to you, Michelle.
That's right, Michael, and Dr. Zani is also ODM's Secretary General. Let's hear from her on matters, the manifesto that was launched last evening. Many thanks for joining us on Morning Express. Let's have your overall thoughts, first of all, on the manifesto launched by NASA. Many saying it was very elaborate, others saying it's an empty promise, seemingly, because it's, very fairy tale-y. Talk to us about your thoughts on this manifesto.
I think it's not very a fairy tale. I think when you look at matters development, there's always a very clear trajectory about how countries develop and how they're able to change the economy of those countries. And they hinge on two very critical sectors. That is the social sector and the economic sector. There are two schools of thought when it comes to development, whether you should actually first start by building the human capital or whether you should start by building infrastructure. Now, developing countries mainly have not been able to really find out exactly which way to go in terms of which priority to give. But usually, whichever sector you build on, if you build on the human resource sector through education, through health, these become very critical pillars for building up on the economy. At the same time, you need to be able to look at the infrastructure because you need to support this growing human resource that is coming up within a continent. And you're looking, for example, at issues of education. You're looking at issues, for example, of security. You're looking at issues of food security. You're looking at issues of infrastructure. So all these come into interplay. So most of the time it is a balancing act. Now, many countries have been able to put this together in a very viable manner and been able to do the takeoff. Because if you're looking at, for example, Rostow thinking in terms of development theories, you're looking at a trajectory where a country has to take off. Now, a country is going to take off when it's able to balance this. And this is very, very important. And I think looking at the manifesto, these are the issues that are being addressed. Because I think we're looking at 50 years after independence and a sense in which that we need to be able to put this together. That means in this equation, there's something that hasn't really fitted into place. And this is what we're trying to address in this manifesto.
To be well. And many times, even just with that balancing act you speak about, many of it gets lost in corruption, whether it's education or it's food security. And so all eyes will be on the NASA party or NASA government if they win the election on August 8th on how they're going to deal with corruption. Do you think what was set out in that manifesto is elaborate enough to deal with corruption? A lot of criticism on that as well.
I think it's very important to indicate that even when we look at the situation in terms of where we are now, many people think about, for example, when you're talking about development, how do you get the money in? The money in, it comes in through taxes. And it's very important to put into place a tax system that is going to control. I think in Kenya, what we have now is a very good revenue collection system. So you have a sense of what is coming in, but you have very little control about how it is going out. And in our plan, we intend to empower the Office of the Auditor General. That is very, very critical in controlling to ensure that each aspect of financing and the way money has been spent, whether it is through IFMIS, whether it is through any system, that there's a way that people can be able to follow up. But many of the countries that have been able to, again, have the takeoff have been able to do this because they've been able to address corruption. And no matter what you do, if you don't address corruption, it means whatever you're getting in is going out not to develop what is already there. So, for example, if it's money you've been putting into infrastructure, for example, in roads, and it doesn't go there, it means the roads will not be done. Now, many countries have been able to make it, and you remember China made a big revolution and tightened on corruption because it means that the money can actually come back, it can be reinvested, so that after it's reinvested, it's actually able to build up more in terms of the economy. So I think being able to address corruption is very, very key. And it'll also help to then reduce the national debt, which is almost going to 4 trillion now. Because the main thing is that this money that is spiraling out is not coming back into economic development per se, or social development per se. So it's the same money that's meant to deal with water, for example, in communities. It's the same money that's meant to go into food security. It's the same money that is meant to go into schools. And we're proposing a national platform where we're going to be able to have education fee from primary and secondary. So again, it comes to this residual model, which is very, very important because at the end of the day, you need to be able to make sure as your human resources grow, your capital is also growing. Now, developed countries are a little bit easy in terms of that direction because their human capital, their human resource is very, very small. Their populations are smaller, so their economy is able to feed in to deal with the people in those countries because their population is smaller. Now, in African countries, we have the reverse situation. We have a very huge population without a very strong economy. So instead of putting the money for investment, the money is getting eaten up, and then sometimes it doesn't get to the right places because of this corruption pacts and
allegations. And of course, NASA has also been preaching a government of inclusivity, because
Very
also
important.
Historically looking, we've had many were feeling marginalized or left out when it comes to government issues. But it is proposing a rather interesting model there in its first 100 days in office to sponsor a bill that would provide for a hybrid executive system. What does that mean? Because there's a fear that Kenyans may never have to elect a president again. And why this particular model?
I think at the moment what is happening is that we have a situation where we are running through a country where we have 43 ethnic groups, but it's only certain groups we seem to think that are able to make it, for example, into getting jobs, that they're able to make it to be able to be seen in the front line. We want a rotational system where each country and each community can be able to feel that they have a say in this country. Now, when we're talking about these different ethnic communities, it's very important that it's not confused and somebody does not say we're talking about tribalism, because that's how that twist is made, and then it's not the right twist. We need to be able to move to a place, and this is what we're saying, that we need to be able to have a rotational system, so that different people can come on board at different times and take the leadership of this country.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us on Morning Express. Nominated Senator Dr. Agnes Zani, who is also ODM's Secretary General, speaking to us on matters the NASA manifesto, which was launched last night. Let me now hand you over back to Michael Gitonga for more news making headlines. Thank you.